With the small, carefully wrapped package in my gloved hands, I climbed the curved driveway, listening to the crunch of snow beneath my boots. My breath condensed into clouds in the chilly December air, and the massive mansion in front of me sparkled with Christmas lights. The room above Mrs. Peterson's garage, where I had spent the previous 18 months of my life, was strangely silent until the sound of music and laughter escaped from within. I paused at the massive oak door, suddenly aware of my weathered coat and the simplicity of my present, a photo album I had handcrafted that documented our family's history. 3 years ago, I would have been inside that house, welcoming guests and restocking champagne glasses. I sold everything 3 years ago so that my kids could pursue their dreams. Mom, you're making a wise decision. Emma said something as I was signing the paperwork to sell our family home. We will all benefit from this investment in the future. My oldest son, David, had given a rousing nod. When the restaurant becomes profitable, you are welcome to live in my spare bedroom. Furthermore, my youngest child, sweet Lily, had hugged me tightly. I assure you that we will not forget your sacrifice. They convinced me. I had devoted myself entirely to raising them on my own after their father died, leaving us with only debt and memories. My only asset was the house. The culmination of 30 years of dedicated effort. My 3 children were able to start their own businesses using the money they earned from selling it, places where David eats, Emma shops, and Lily operates her graphic design business. I had been staying in different spare bedrooms for a while, taking turns living in each one. However, as their businesses grew, they found themselves busier. Family dinner invites began to dwindle. Nobody returned my calls. Eventually, I rented the small room above Mrs. Peterson's garage and made do with my meager pension and occasional substitute teaching gigs. I braced myself and rang the doorbell as I stood outside Emma's grand house. The frosted glass revealed elegantly dressed figures. As soon as the door opened, my daughter emerged shining in a crimson cocktail dress and sporting an ornate hairstyle I'd never seen her wear before. Her grin faded when she saw me. My mother. Rather than greeting her, her voice sounded confused. Why are you in this location? I held out the box and announced that I was presenting a Christmas present. Maybe I could spend some time with everyone. Emma stepped outside, half closing the door behind her and reflecting on how long it had been since. Her eyes were as cold as the icy air that bit my cheeks. Excuse me, but this is an invitation-only event, she explained in a low voice. Here, you'll find important clients. Lily and David as well. The moment is not right. Slapped. That was the feeling I had. Isn't now the time? Your mother has arrived and I am grateful. However, Emma, you should have called me beforehand. She anxiously peered back through the entrance. Is next week a good time to have lunch? Let me call you. Contrary to our expectations, she was not going to. Something within me snapped right then, just as she had ignored my calls for the previous 3 months. A wave of realization came over me. My own children began to regard me as an annoyance, a relic of their less privileged past that had no place in their more privileged present. I looked beyond her into the inviting, shimmering room, beyond where my son David stood, holding a champagne glass and conversing with a group of people. Looking through a different entrance, I noticed Lily setting out a platter of silver hors d'oeuvres. All of them were in one place. I was totally unaware of it. It was unexpected what I did next. There was no deliberate attempt at effect or lesson planning. It was simply a woman's behavior after she had reached rock bottom. I stepped calmly past Emma into the home's embrace, straightened my back, inhaled deeply, and entered. As everyone looked at me, the conversation slowed to a halt. Except for the gentle carols that drifted through the air, nobody spoke. "Dear Mom," Emma, embarrassed, hissed behind me. As I stood in front of a room full of strangers, clutching my small gift, I wore my used coat and thought about the 3 children I had sacrificed everything for. Then, with an inner calm I hadn't realized I possessed, I placed the package on a nearby table, removed my coat, and spoke clearly enough for everyone in the room to hear me. I wish everyone a joyous Christmas. This is Ruth Wallace. My children are Lily, David, Emma, and me. There was complete silence after that. As all of the guests in the room turned their attention to my children, they stood motionless, staring at me in disbelief. What I noticed in their eyes was completely unexpected. What a disgrace! However, everything changed when something else happened. For the sake of my family's future, including my children and myself, a distinguished elderly man in a pricey suit rose from the crowd and advanced. Light reflected off his silver hair and his kind but piercing eyes fixed on mine. "How about Ruth Wallace?" he inquired, his tone indicating his skepticism. Who was this Ruth Wallace? She worked at Westridge High School for 20 years, teaching English. Surprised, I nodded. It is I indeed. He relaxed his jaw and smiled warmly. I doubt you remember my name, Mrs. Wallace. My name is Richard Harmon. My son Michael was one of your students in 2001. You stayed after school for 3 days in a row to help him, and he was struggling. He then turned towards the audience. I owe this woman my son's future. She had a significant impact on his life and is the reason he is now a published author. The room remained completely silent, but the atmosphere had changed. Dozens of inquisitive eyes pressed down on me. Michael is on my mind, I whispered. His eloquence was truly astonishing. His only need was for someone to believe in him. Richard Harmon took a step closer, grasping my hand. I never found you the first time, and I still haven't expressed my gratitude enough. After hearing that the school had lost contact with you, he averted his gaze for a moment before returning to Emma, whose cheeks had turned apathetic. I had no idea you had ties to the Wallace family. Emma refused to admit that Ruth Wallace was her mother. Emma took a step forward, her composure slipping. Mr. Harmon, I didn't realize you knew my mother. Are you familiar with her? Richard laughed. Your mother is practically a legend among Westridge parents. Her name is now associated with a scholarship. His attention shifted back to me. The fact that I was told you were unable to attend the award ceremony last month is even more perplexing. My chest tightened from fear. A ceremony for presenting awards? There was no ceremony that I was informed of. David stepped forward and set his champagne glass on the table. Which awards show? His anxious gaze shifted between Richard and me. Richard seemed perplexed. Westridge presented this award for legacy. An initial grant of $50,000 is provided. We contacted your family when we were unable to reach you directly. Then he motioned toward my children. It was said you were embarking on an endless journey abroad. The floor beneath me swung back and forth. Richard's words hit me like a tidal wave of consequences. My children overheard a conversation about a prize and the money that was supposed to go to me. They intentionally withheld information from me and informed others that I was unavailable. Lily, with a pale complexion, joined David by his side. Listen, Mom, we will be able to explain it. Surely you can, I whispered as everything came together. My kids ignored the unidentified phone calls I brought up. They had offered to pick up the mail for me when I first moved out, for the sake of simplicity. A female spectator took a deep breath before speaking. Sorry, but I was wondering if you were the same Ruth Wallace who wrote those excellent essays for the Teacher's Quarterly. Before she was small, I would read them to her. They inspired her to pursue a career as a teacher. Another visitor spoke up before I could respond. Hey, remember when you led the effort to raise funds for the children's library after the 2010 fire? Your passionate speech prompted my company to make a donation. Everyone in the room began to recognize me one by one, not as a humiliated mother to my children, but as someone who had made a difference. Who among us had made a positive impact in this town? With each new revelation, my children seemed to withdraw further into themselves. Richard continued to hold my hand. Ruth, you can find me on the West Ridge board. The funds from that grant are still awaiting your approval. It does not end there. Your leadership of our new educational outreach program has been under consideration for quite some time. Paid in full with benefits. We were unable to find you. With all of the implications, I felt lightheaded. I'm spending every dime I have just to make ends meet, performing various odd jobs, residing in an apartment that is barely larger than a closet. Even though praise and opportunities had been coming my way, my own kids had the audacity to interrupt. My children and I need to have a private conversation, I said softly, struggling to find my voice. I understand, Richard nodded. Then please use my card. Make sure you call me tomorrow. He pressed a business card down into my hand. A lot needs to be covered. Emma stepped forward. She'd regained her professional smile, but her terrified expression betrayed it. Could you please assemble in the dining room, ladies and gentlemen? We're almost ready to serve dinner. As she pointed to an archway, the still hushed crowd began to file toward it. After the final visitor left, I turned to face my 3 children. Their expressions varied greatly from Lily's sobs to Emma's measured calm. Emma started talking to her mother. It does not appear like this. So what is it? My voice became more steady as I inquired, which surprised me. Simply put, opportunities have been slipping through your fingers. Your statements about me appear to have been misleading. It appears that my own children have been plotting my demise. David straightened his back. We took action to ensure your safety. Keeping me safe? Where did the money come from? A job? Are there any financial safety nets? Does my life's work deserve recognition? He maintained, because he was stressed. From responsibility. Mother, you're no longer a young woman. You deserve a break after everything you've been through. Get some sleep. Incredulously, I replied, living in an apartment above a garage, calculating rent by counting pennies? How's that for a break? Lily dried the tears. We were about to inform you about the honor. Our first thought was that, wow, you had an idea? There was a startling silence as I spoke. As usual, Emma took the initiative. Investing in businesses that could eventually provide for our entire family seemed like a better use of the money. Everyone, including you. Behold, it stood there, the naked truth. They stole what was rightfully mine, claiming it was for my benefit, when in reality it was all for them. Is this how you intended to spend the proceeds from my house sale? Excuse me? I asked. That house, which your father and I had been saving for our entire lives. What became of the house where I raised you after he died? A look of shame appeared on their faces, which confirmed my suspicions. Their companies had not received every penny of the money I had given them. After giving Emma and David their investments, I remembered that they both had a designer wardrobe, a sports car, and a trip to the Maldives. What happened with the funds? My demand was strong. Not one thing. I'd like to know immediately. David's expression hardened. We shouldn't be discussing this right now. Time is of the essence. I retaliated. Simply put, I will not tolerate it if any of you 3 refuse to acknowledge my existence. I've had enough of being ignored and dismissed. I've had enough of giving my all for no reward, including the most basic form of respect. With a wave of serenity washing over me, I fumbled for Richard's card in my pocket. I will contact Richard tomorrow. I'm taking that position. The prize money is mine to keep. Then I'll change my life in a variety of ways, starting with how my own kids treat me. Emma pulled her brows down. What does this even mean? Our eyes remained locked. This means that I'm reclaiming my life. It also implies that you, the trio, are faced with a choice. A server appeared as the dining room doors swung open at that exact moment. Miss Wallace, your esteemed guests are ready. Should I start from the first lesson? Emma appeared conflicted as she watched the drama unfold in her living room and reflected on her party. Of course I'd appreciate it. We will arrive right on time. She returned her attention to me after the server had left, her voice husky and urgent. Mother, I beg you. Will we bring this up again tomorrow? This evening's events will shape my future. As I looked at my stunning, successful, and completely egocentric daughter, a strange combination of love and disappointment washed over me. Emma, I've always prioritized you and your future over mine. Goodbye, my friend. After that, I went to the dining room where the rest of the party guests were waiting. As I approached the entrance, I turned around to face my children once more. Oh, and the present I brought, I whispered, this is the deed to our family home. I was able to recover it with the assistance of a long-lost acquaintance. I plan to have all three of you sign it as a Christmas present. Currently, I am unsure. I could tell from the surprise on their faces that they had completely underestimated me, not for the first time. Unbeknownst to them, I had one last surprise in store for them, one that would force them to confront not only their actions against me, but also their own transformation. I confidently walked into the dining room, and I could hear them close behind me whispering something urgent to each other. It was already too late, regardless of what strategy they devised. The unraveling of the truth had already begun. By the time dessert was served, everyone in attendance would have a clear understanding of my children's personality traits and the type of mother I had been. With my arrival, the diners fell silent. I looked around and noticed dozens of faces that were clearly curious. Emma quickly passed me by, assuming the role of hostess and escorting guests to their seats. My heart sank as I realized the ornately decorated table lacked a place card for me. Richard Harmon looked over at me before pointing to an empty chair next to him. Hey, Ruth, come over here. It would be a huge honor. I sat down and looked over to see my children huddled near the kitchen door, deep in thought. They were clearly planning their reaction to the situation and me based on their stealthy glances in my direction. Mrs. Wallace, the woman across the table from him, leaned forward. Richard just mentioned your teaching career. Did you actually persuade the school board to support a reading program for troubled teens once? Just as I was about to respond, Emma appeared beside me, her smile delicate and vulnerable. Before we begin, I'd like to propose a toast to everyone. When she raised her glass, the discussion came to an abrupt end. To new alliances and brighter futures. Richard's gaze remained fixed on me as the glasses clinked on the table. Ruth, you were not asked to answer that question. What about the literature course? Finally finding my voice, I replied. Yes, we named it Words of Change. We identified authors who had overcome adversity and shared their stories with struggling students. It was a big hit. Did it work? Richard laughed. It became a program that 3 states used as an example. He informed the group that their mother was being overly modest. She has made a significant difference in the lives of many people through her work. David looked at me from across the room. He was becoming increasingly anxious as he watched the conversation. Even my ambitious children were unimpressed with my low-key teaching style. Even after their father died and left us in debt, they continued to be embarrassed by my modest career and concentrated on their father's more profitable business ventures. Lily offered to join the conversation as she sat next to Mom, stating that Mom was always dedicated to her students. Despite her pleasant demeanor, her anxiety was palpable. I did say that, but I must admit that I am surprised you remember Lily. You previously mentioned to me that teaching was an alternative career for those who failed to succeed in the real world. There were a few uneasy laughs coming from all over the table. Lily's cheeks flushed red. Emma interjected with ease, assuring her friend that she had not intended it that way. Mom's work has always made us proud. Are you really proud of yourself that you never told your coworkers about her achievements? Richard inquired naively. That surprises me, given all of the opportunities her reputation could have provided for you. The first course brought a brief shift in focus. I took advantage of the opportunity to watch my children. Their expressions varied from calculated calm to outright terror. They were trying to figure out how to reclaim the narrative they had painstakingly crafted without me. I understand you're living more simply these days, a man further down the table exclaimed to Mrs. Wallace. Was that a decision made after you decided to retire? I could see Emma almost choke on the wine. To be honest, she had been attempting to avoid this exact type of discussion. Nonsense, I responded calmly. My children's businesses required initial funding, so I sold our home after my husband died. It was expected that the arrangement would be temporary. The table fell into an awkward silence. I assume you're the benefactor who funded Savory, the Emporium, and Wallace Designs. I approached a woman I knew who was a business reporter in the area and asked her, "That is truly remarkable." In a brief statement, David joined us at the table and expressed how important Mom's support had been. Of course, we owe our entire success to our own hard work. Yes, I was in agreement. On the other hand, I must inquire, David, did you inform me that you could not afford to assist with my dental surgery before or after your spring luxury vacation to the Maldives? David's colors faded. I could almost see the reporter's mental notebook filling up as her brows furrowed. This isn't the place, Emma hissed at her mother. Emma, do you know what I am talking about? I inquired, keeping a low voice. Where do you live? I have not been invited here in over a year. Where are you located? My attempts to contact you have been blocked by your assistant. When were we supposed to sit down and discuss this? There was an obvious level of tension in the room. Uncomfortably intrigued by their appetizers, guests exchanged unsettling glances. Lily desperately suggested we change the subject. Well done, I couldn't agree more. The Westridge Legacy Award is something we should consider. That one came with a $50,000 grant. It was the one you three took from me. The silence was broken only by the sound of a dropped fork. Is this accurate? Richard looked at my children, clearly surprised. Emma was the first to recover. Something went wrong during the translation. We planned to surprise Mom with it. Could you tell me when it is? Excuse me, I asked. According to Richard, the award was announced 3 months ago. The telephone went dead. The check was cashed. Richard inquired, his tone becoming harsher. My children's guilty expressions revealed everything he needed to know. My siblings are authorized to accept it on my behalf. Instead, Emma made do. Mom's retirement funds are being held in a trust. That had me laughing. Even I was surprised by the noise. Such trust is entirely new to me. While I have been living above a garage and working as a substitute teacher to make ends meet, the table was surrounded by a cacophony of whispers. Everyone present could see the plot thickening. They had cheated on their mother, my successful children. David suddenly rose to his feet. This is an intimate family matter. This is not something you bring up at dinner, in my opinion. I disagree, the reporter stated. As someone who has written extensively about your company's success stories, I am particularly interested in your initial funding and investor compensation. Emma, with a shaky professional demeanor, insisted that our mother was not an investor. She was helping her children just as any mother would. Repeating gently, I did what any mother would do. I had the same thought. It was unavoidable that after receiving everything from their mother, any child would care for her. Lily broke down in tears. Please don't think so, Mom. We were completely involved in everything: companies, social groups, and the desire to project a sense of success. In that situation, what role did I play? Excuse me? I asked. Did I serve as an obnoxious reminder of your past? Is this just something to put away and forget about? There was complete silence in the room. Neither of my children could respond. Richard removed any throat debris. Ruth, the job offer remains valid despite everything that has happened. It would be a privilege to have you lead our community engagement initiative. Richard, I'm grateful. Really, I admitted. You have no idea how much I appreciate that. Emma's once red face had turned white. A job? You're not required to work, Mom. No worries, we're here to help. How have you looked after me for the past 18 months? Excuse me? I asked. No, I am grateful. I'd rather focus on my own needs. David spoke in a low, urgent tone as he leaned forward. Mother, I beg you. You are bringing shame to us in the eyes of others. Am I making you appear foolish? A wave of rage washed over me. Are you embarrassed that I've been poor for a year and a half while you three have lived lavishly on the money I saved? The main course was served, but no one appeared to be hungry. The suspense at the table was simply too compelling to ignore. Perhaps your children just didn't understand how difficult things were for you, an elderly woman at the other end of the table suggested to Ruth. Effective communication is reciprocal. Her diplomatic efforts were admirable, but I wasn't about to let my children off the hook so easily. I revealed that I had a policy of calling each of them once a week. They found out about my room's leaking roof and how I had to choose between food and heat for several months. Emma claimed she didn't have time to chat because she was so busy. Lily said she'd come by, but she never did. And David suggested I make better use of my money. Lily started crying uncontrollably. I intended to, she said quietly. I just became engrossed. What for? Excuse me, I asked. The most important thing was to ensure your mother's well-being. David responded by creating something valuable, his eyes revealing a fleeting look of rebellion. Creating enduring businesses, coming into our own. You wanted that for us, right? I'll admit it. I wanted you to succeed. Just make sure it didn't jeopardize your humanity or integrity. Emma believes that is unfair. As I previously stated, we got off to a great start due to my sacrifice, so we've been working extremely hard, an act of selflessness that you have never acknowledged or appreciated. I extracted a weathered leather wallet from my purse. I took a worn picture from it. The four of us stood in front of our ancestral home, arms intertwined and smiles on our faces. It was shot the day after your father's burial. Do you recall what I said to you that day as I placed the picture on the table? I inquired. They stared silently at the picture. Right now, we have each other, I added. I reminded them to look out for one another. I fulfilled my part of the commitment. All I can offer you three is myself. When I started causing you problems, you immediately removed me from your lives. After that, there was an ear-splitting silence. As they watched a family break apart, the guests shifted uncomfortably around the table. Following that, a different voice came from the archway. "This is not the Christmas dinner I expected." A towering, distinguished man in his 60s stood at the entrance holding a gift. All eyes were on him. His silver locks were covered in snow, and his gentle eyes were fixed on me. "Hello," he murmured to Ruth. "Numerous years have passed." The moment I saw him, my face flushed with recognition. My first love, Charles Montclair, to whom I was engaged before meeting the father of my children, and with whom I recently reconnected through a mutual friend, contacted me. My breath caught, Charles. "I was under the impression that you would not be returning to town until next week." He grinned. "My work was done ahead of schedule. Your surprise was my intention." In the tent, he looked over the table. "However, it appears that I am not the only one who was surprised tonight." Emma got up right away. Tell me who you are." Charles extended a hand. "Charles Montclair, your mother and I were once very close. We have just gotten back in touch." I could feel the ideas forming in my children's heads. They had no idea I had maintained contact with someone from my past, especially someone who clearly thought highly of me. David started out slowly. "Mom, I've never heard you bring it up." I responded fairly, but I left out a lot. "Similarly, there are many questions you haven't asked." Charles examined the situation carefully. "It appears that I have just ended an important conversation," Richard replied. "You have no idea," and rose to shake Charles' hand. "Hello, Richard Harmon. I used to be Ruth's friend as well, but in a different capacity. Make plans to be present. I believe Ruth would benefit from having another ally at the table." As Charles sat next to me, I felt a surge of energy that I had not realized I had lost. With the help of two men who accepted me unconditionally, I mustered the courage to complete the task at hand. After telling Charles that my children believe I require their protection, he left the room. They appear to be attempting to keep me from opportunities for employment, award funds, and even my own autonomy. Charles's face became gloomy. His gaze scanned my 3 children as he turned to face them. So what, Emma, who was known for her quick thinking, attempted to reclaim command. "Mr. Montclair, you have gotten yourself involved in a delicate family matter. Perhaps we could continue where we left off another time." Charles forced a smile despite the fact that it did not come naturally. "The timing is ideal, in my opinion. I have some news that could change everything, and I've come to tell your mother." I was one of many people who looked directly at Charles. "When we spoke last week, this wasn't part of the plan. Is there any news?" Concerned, I inquired. Charles extended his arm across the table and took my hand. "I was incorrect about how long it would take to arrange the investment opportunity I mentioned. It has already been approved. You can use the funds right away." David stooped down. "Is there an opportunity for investment? Are there any good investment opportunities?" Charles respectfully turned to face him. "He sought my approval because despite your mother's request that I wait until it was finalized before discussing it, we are all being completely open tonight." Curious about the accelerated schedule, I gave the signal. At dinner, Charles introduced himself as the managing partner of Montclair Global Investments. We specialize in educational technology and programs. Ruth showed me some of her innovative classroom strategies, and I immediately recognized their potential. Based on her findings, we are prepared to provide funding for a comprehensive educational platform. Emma's entrepreneurial instincts took over. "Could you please clarify the type of funding we are discussing?" $2 million, Charles said peacefully. There was an undeniable presence of numbers around Ruth, the majority stakeholder and creative director. $2 million, more than enough to change everything, more than I had ever imagined having. Shock was written all over my children's faces as they looked at me. Despite having previously dismissed the mother as financially ignorant, professionally irrelevant, and socially embarrassing, They were now offering her a multi-million-dollar business opportunity. When asked about it, Lily whispered, "You never mentioned it." "No," I consented. I chose not to because I realized that the three people who were most important to me did not value my accomplishments or the opportunities that came my way. Thus, I stopped disseminating them. My children appeared to be coming to terms with the fact that they had lost not only money, but also trust and relationships. But before they could react, Charles dropped another bombshell, casting doubt on all of their assumptions about their predictable, practical mother. He set a small velvet box on the table and said, "There's something else you should know." His gaze never left mine, something that would clarify my willingness to support Ruth's idea. The velvet box sat between us, acting as a silent interrogator. My heart was thumping against my ribs as I looked at it. Surely that was not his intention. "Charles, what are you up to?" I whispered. A gentle smile spread across his lips. "I should have done this 40 years ago." Emma's suspiciously sharp voice cut through the air. "Tell me, Mom, who is this man?" I took a clear look at my daughter.